And if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there are places in the United States, yes, the land of the free and home of the TSA pat-downs, where federal laws just stop, where the Constitution takes a coffee break, where you could technically do things that would get you arrested in literally any other zip code. Yeah, those places exist. We're not talking about international waters. We're not talking about some billionaire's private island. We're talking about American soil, real, documented, Google mappable. And the craziest part? Most Americans have no idea they exist. The government barely talks about them. Your civics teacher definitely didn't mention them. And some of these places, they're closer to you than the nearest Walmart. But here's the thing. Before the algorithm decides this video is too spicy and buries it next to conspiracy theories about birds not being real, before some three-letter agency adds me to a watch list, and definitely before Elon buys the concept of jurisdiction itself and makes it a subscription service, we need to talk about the legal black holes hiding in plain sight across America. Oh, and real quick, if you appreciate the kind of content that makes you question everything you learned in middle school, hit that like button. Not because I need validation, though therapy is expensive, but because apparently freedom of information is great, but algorithmic favorability is greater. Subscribe if you want more uncomfortable truths, served with a side of existential dread. Your teacher lied to you, but I won't, so let's start here. You know that feeling when you're driving through a speed trap at 3 a.m. and you're like, please don't see me, please don't see me. Or when you accidentally download something and immediately wonder if the FBI guy watching through your webcam just perked up. Or when you read the terms and conditions. Just kidding, nobody does that. But if you did, and realized you signed away your soul to 17 different corporations before breakfast? Yeah, that anxiety, that constant low-level terror that you're one wrong move away from becoming a case study. Now imagine none of that. Imagine places where those rules just don't exist, where the law is more of a suggestion, where sovereignty is a choose-your-own-adventure book. Sounds like freedom, right? Sounds like paradise? Narrator voice. It was not paradise. Because here's what nobody tells you about legal gray zones. They're gray for a reason. They exist in the spaces where America's paperwork got messy, where history, geography, and bureaucracy had a three-way collision and nobody wanted to clean it up. And what we're about to uncover is the truth hidden under the very expensive carpet of modern civilization, the one your tax dollars paid for, but nobody vacuumed under. Block 1. The places that forgot to be America. Let's start with the obvious one, that isn't obvious at all. American Samoa. Beautiful islands, stunning beaches, and absolutely, positively, definitely not fully part of America. Wait, what? Yeah. American Samoa is a U.S. territory, has been since 1900, but people born there aren't automatically U.S. citizens. They're U.S. nationals. Which is like being told you can sit at the cool kids table, but you can't actually eat the pizza. The Constitution doesn't fully apply there. It's like America's legal beta test server. Some laws work, some don't. Some are just vibing. It's the equivalent of downloading a game and realizing half the features are coming soon TM. And the ugly reality? This isn't an accident. It's by design. Because full constitutional coverage would interfere with traditional Samoan land ownership laws. So the U.S. government essentially said, let's just not finish the paperwork on this one. They've been not finishing for 124 years. That's not a loophole, that's a philosophy. But here's what they don't want you asking. If American Samoa can exist in this legal limbo for over a century, what's stopping them from doing the same thing somewhere else? Somewhere closer to you? Keep that thought, because it gets worse. Block 2. Reservation Nation. Now let's talk about the big one. The elephant in the room. The 326 federally recognized Native American reservations scattered across the country. These aren't just special zones. They're sovereign nations. With their own laws, their own courts, their own police. You can literally drive from one legal system into another in less time than it takes to finish a true crime podcast episode. Here's the thing, though. It's complicated. Because while tribes are sovereign, they're also under federal jurisdiction, but not state jurisdiction, except when they are, depending on Public Law 280, which applies to some states but not others, and even then only sometimes. And look, if you're confused, so is everyone else, including the lawyers. It's like if the MCU multiverse was written by the IRS. And here's the really fun part. There are over 2 million acres of disputed or unclaimed land within reservation boundaries, places where nobody's quite sure who's in charge. Picture this. You're standing in a field. Federal agents to your left say, "Our jurisdiction." Tribal police to your right say, "Our jurisdiction." State troopers behind you say, "Probably our jurisdiction." And you're just standing there like, "I just wanted to take a nature photo." The punchline? All of them are technically correct. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. In 2020, there was a Supreme Court case that redrew jurisdictional maps overnight. Millions of acres changed hands legally, and most people didn't even hear about it. So the question is, what else has changed that you don't know about? Block 3. The high seas of Highway 95. Ever heard of the Constitution Free Zone? No? That's because they don't advertise it. The U.S. has this thing, a lovely little regulation, where federal agents can operate with reduced Fourth Amendment protections within 100 miles of any external boundary. That includes coasts, and borders, and international airports. Do the math. That's basically 2/3 of the American population living in a zone where "papers, please" isn't just a catchphrase. It's Tuesday. 2/3. It's like living in a movie about a dystopian future, except the future is now, and the movie is a documentary nobody wants to watch. Border Patrol can set up checkpoints, they can search vehicles, they can ask for documentation. And you're not even at the border. You're just near the concept of a border. It's geographical guilt by association. And the really beautiful irony? The Statue of Liberty, the literal symbol of American freedom, sits in the Constitution Free Zone. She's not waving. She's surrendering. But wait, you want to know the really fun part? That 100-mile radius? It's not set in stone. It's a policy. Policies can be changed, expanded, adjusted. What happens when someone decides 100 miles isn't enough? What happens when the zone becomes everywhere? Hold that thought, because our next location makes that look tame. Block 4. Guantanamo Bay, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Legal Void. Okay, let's get dark for a second. Guantanamo Bay. You've heard of it. You probably have opinions about it. But here's what's legally fascinating, in the most disturbing way possible. It exists in a jurisdiction vacuum. It's on Cuban soil, but controlled by America. It's not technically U.S. territory, so the Constitution doesn't fully apply. But it's under U.S. military control, so Cuban law doesn't apply either. It's Schrodinger's jurisdiction, simultaneously American and not American until someone opens the legal box. And inside, people have been held for years, decades, without trial. Because when you're in a place where laws don't quite reach, due process becomes more of a suggestion than a requirement. It's like a legal black hole. Information goes in, rights don't come out. And the precedent it sets is terrifying. Because once you establish that you can create zones where the rules don't apply just this once for special circumstances, well, history has some notes on how that usually goes. The punchline writes itself, and it's not funny. And here's the nightmare fuel. Guantanamo isn't the only one. There are other facilities, other black sites, other places where the same legal logic applies, places that don't have names you'd recognize, places that aren't on the news. So, how many more are there? And how do you know you're not near one right now? Block 5. The territories that time forgot. Let's speed run the greatest hits of American places that aren't quite American. Puerto Rico, 3.2 million Americans who can't vote for president. Taxation with representation was so last century. Guam, where half the island is military base, and the other half is wondering if anyone in Washington remembers they exist. U.S. Virgin Islands, where federal minimum wage doesn't fully apply because… reasons? Northern Mariana Islands, which negotiated its own special immigration system that's different from literally everywhere else in America. These places exist in a weird limbo. They're American when it's convenient, like during wars, when recruitment is needed, and not American when it's expensive, like when disaster relief is being calculated. They pay taxes. Well, some taxes, but not all taxes. They follow laws. Well, some laws, but not all laws. It's like being in a relationship that's complicated on Facebook, except the relationship is with democracy itself. And here's the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. If these territories can exist in legal limbo indefinitely, what's stopping them from adding more places to the list? What happens when economic collapse hits a city? When disaster strikes? When it becomes temporarily convenient to suspend full constitutional coverage somewhere on the mainland? Because that precedent, it's already set. And here's where it gets truly wild. Because these aren't just quirky legal fun facts. These are precedents. These are proof of concepts. Every time we establish a zone where laws don't quite apply, where rights are negotiable, where jurisdiction is complicated, we're building a framework. And frameworks can be expanded. Today it's territories and reservations and border zones. Tomorrow? Who knows? Special economic zones. Disaster areas with temporary suspensions of rights. Digital spaces where terms of service replace constitutional protections. We're not sliding down the slippery slope. We're speed-running it with coconut oil and a GoPro. The question isn't, could this get worse? The question is, how much worse before someone notices? And here's the truly terrifying part. Some legal experts argue that in times of national emergency, a term that's conveniently never properly defined, these zones could be expanded. Temporarily, of course, just until the crisis passes. Except temporary has a funny way of becoming permanent when nobody's paying attention. So what constitutes an emergency? Who decides? And what happens when the exception becomes the rule? So here's what we've learned. America, the nation that literally brands itself as the land of laws, of order, of justice for all, has built-in exceptions, legal asterisks, fine print that covers entire islands, and most of us have no idea, because these zones exist in the gaps, in the spaces between what we're taught in school and what actually happens, between the Constitution as written and the Constitution as applied. They're not conspiracies. They're just inconvenient truths that nobody really wants to market. And the really uncomfortable part? These places work great as long as you're not the one stuck in them. But here's the final question, the one that should haunt you. These zones exist because someone, somewhere, decided they were necessary, convenient, expedient. So what happens when that someone decides your neighborhood is next? But hey, speaking of places where normal rules don't apply, next video we're diving into the international zones inside U.S. airports where technically you're not even in America yet, and the wild legal gymnastics that happen there. And trust me, what happens in those spaces makes everything we just discussed look like child's play. Because if you think losing your rights at the border is bad, wait until you hear what happens in the 30 feet between the gate and customs. It's not just legal limbo, it's legal purgatory. Click now before I send you to Guam without sunscreen. Subscribe before the algorithm decides facts are too controversial, like before the simulation realizes you're paying attention. And remember, freedom is great, but knowing where it actually applies, that's even better. The question is, do you actually know?